This is an episode of the kitchen sewing table, even though I am, again, not at the table. This is my 1916 66-1 or 66-3, depending on whether you have it in a treadle or a hand crank. Right now it has a hand crank. And what I am making is a dust mop. And in a moment I will show you how I got to this point. I needed mops. I have wet mops all set, and I went to buy a new dust mop, and unfortunately the one I wanted is a little bit expensive right now. It's about $65. So I figured, well, I'm just going to be inventive and make my own. And I will show you in a moment how I got the idea for making this and the type of handle that you would need. But what I want to point out is another example of a Singer 66 sewing through just about anything. These strands are 3 strands of yarn knit on a large bulky spool knitter, and there are actually, I started with 17 feet of spool knitting, but each one is about an inch thick. And then I have sheeting, polyester cotton sheeting, which is extremely tightly woven. All in all, a very bulky item to be sewing. And I don't know how far I can go before it starts to go crooked. But this, there's nothing here but a hand crank. And it's going crooked because I'm actually using this on a bureau. And then when you get, it helps a little bit to pull it through when you get to this point, because you're going to be coming through a little bit of a bump here, and then you want to turn and go back that way. So you want to do like rows back and forth to sew this in place. And I will finish that, and then I will show you the type of handle you need. Now, I'm actually showing you this on the floor. Some of you may remember I have PTSD that leads to seizures. And I was in the middle of mopping about a week ago at night before a housing inspection, and the mop broke. And it threw me into a tizzy of mop buying. My favorite mop is a Fuller Brush Company wet mop that is not in the picture right here. It's actually hanging outside drying. But I wanted to have a backup mop. Mopping is therapeutic, so between COVID and wanting to clean the floors all the time because you never know what we track in, and it's just therapeutic. With everything going on, you mop the floor, you feel better. So anyway, this is one of the wet mops. This is called a jaw clamp mop handle. You can buy the handle by itself. Rubbermaid makes one. This is like a generic Rubbermaid. About $15.99 for the handle on Amazon. And this is the type of mop head it takes. And it's cotton yarn, and they put a 5-inch band in the center of about 3 feet of looped yarn, and then they also stitch a band along the bottom. It's really a great idea, and you can buy replacement mop heads for about $9.99 a piece. And what you do is you fold it in half and you insert that band into the jaw clamp and tighten it, and you have a mop. It's great. So then I went back to Fuller Brush, and I wanted their dust mop, and my grandmother had a Fuller Brush dust mop for years, and they are $64.99, which is a bit pricey, but they're also out of stock right now. So I decided I was going to make a spool knit dust mop. This is 17 feet of knitted strand, as I said. You lay them out flat. You take a rag piece of fabric. Now this is supposed to be 5 inches. This is probably 3.5 or 4. It will still work. As you can see, I used the 66 to just put a few rows of stitching there, and I'm going to do the exact same thing with this jaw clamp head. It's very easy. You just turn the knob and it holds your mop in place. And I can make these all the time out of leftover yarns, and I now have a dust mop. Now, because of that, you heard that, you're going to want to use it so it's sitting on some yarn, or right now I'm on the floor, but if I were standing up, I'd be holding it like that and doing that. So you buy one handle for your wet mop. You have a wet mop head. Then you use your spare yarn to make dust mops. It's wonderful, easy, fast. I don't know how much yarn this took because it's leftovers. Now there is the size difference between the wet mop on the left, which is about 3 feet long, laid out like that, and what I did was make mine 24 inches long, my dust mop. Originally I was going to make it as wide as the wet mop, but then I realized, you know, it's just a dust mop. I'm just going to be going over the floor. Now this, as I said, is 17 feet of knitting, and it's not that much different in the center. The way that the Fuller Brush dust mop is made, they have a frame and an oval, and then they have a lot of wool and acrylic or wool and cotton yarn in a big oval. Beautiful dust mop, but expensive. And this idea, you can make it thicker, is my point. The 5 inches, when they measure 5 inches, it's this way, because when you need enough to grab with the jaw clamp, which would be 2.5. Mine's a little bit short, but it still works. So originally I was going to make enough yarn to do 24. I was going to do 24 feet, so I would have 12 strands going across, which would have had it about this wide. And I decided instead to go to 17 feet, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 strands. It'll work as a dust mop, but you can make it wider or thicker if you want. You can also use a regular knitting Nancy, and if you're one of those people like me that you have a knitting Nancy that's always attached to a skein of yarn and you just keep knitting a long string, you now have something to do with that yarn. You make a dust mop. Now let me just give you a little history. This is my new dust mop, and I'm washing it. A little history about mops. That, you know, I've been mopping my floors for, I don't know, 30, 40 years, and I love mops, and I thought I was taking care of them. And when the mop handle broke, the wet mop handle broke the night it broke, it was because the pole had rusted. And what I've realized since that happened is that it is best, in my opinion, to take the mop head off the mop handle when you're done mopping and let it dry separately. Now that wouldn't really apply with a dust mop, but I wanted to show you keeping it clean is important. We have here, I have a lot of sand and pine needles and dog hair and all kinds of fun stuff that is going to show up on my dust mop. I'm going to treat it the same way that I would treat an expensive wet mop, even though it's made out of leftover fabrics. Now these are all acrylics made by Red Heart, which is made in the USA. And my floor wasn't that dirty. So usually the black leaches color. You may find a little bit of leaching color even from acrylics. This is extremely hot water. But now I'm going to rinse it and hang it up to dry. Now, I'm an artist. This is like the coolest, most fun dust mop I could have. And now you can take hand-spun wool, you can take hand-spun cotton, you can take any kind of colors of acrylic yarn you want, and you can make dust mops, and you can have them all over the place, and you can just dust all your worries away. So this is the Spool Knit Dust Mop from the kitchen sewing table.